Once a week, they would take him out and they say, deny Teresa of Avila, deny the reform, return to the Carmelites. And he would say, no. And then in front of the whole monastery, they would beat him up. They would torture him. He would not be allowed to change his clothes. He suffered terribly. He was broken to pieces, physically and mentally. Very, very difficult period, but he stayed very loyal to his cause, a real spiritual lion. Teresa of Avila is already 50-something. She had her illumination when she was 39. She already started the reform of the Carmelites. She already had the monastery of St. Joseph. And when he meets her, he's like, okay, this is what I've searched for. Somebody like this. They would pray together and they would fly. Literally fly. Teresa of Avila would fly alone, and the other nuns, they would jump on her like a rugby team to keep her down so that the Inquisition doesn't put her on the stake as a witch. And when they would pray together, their devotion, their love for Christ was so great, their body would levitate, and many of their depictions are like this, levitating in prayer. Teresa of Avila is very impressed by him. She comes to visit him. She hears that there is one serious monk there. There's one serious priest. There's a real one. So she goes to him and she says, look, I'm starting this reform. Christ gave me this message. I have a lot of resistance, it's going to be difficult. Maybe the Inquisition will catch us. Maybe we'll be imprisoned. Maybe we'll die in the process. But we're going to bring real spirituality in the world. You want to stay or you want to come with me? And St. John says, yes, let's do it. So they start together the reform. She starts monastery after monastery of women, nuns, and he starts the first monastery. There are just 3. The monastery is a little hut with 3 people. All 3 of them would later become saintly. But living like the Desert Fathers, living like the early Christians, in poverty, living on alms, praying, contemplating, not doing the official facade of spirituality, but the inner work. She manages to get some approvals for some bishops, but there's a whole lot of resistance. After living in this monastery for some years, St. John is arrested. There are 2 groups of the Carmelites. The Teresa ones, they are called the Descalces, without shoes, because they are not taking the things of this world, and the other Carmelites, Encalces, with shoes. So his brothers, the Carmelites, arrest him once. He is released. Somebody high up releases him. That somebody high up, who has a long Spanish name that I can't remember now, dies, and a year later he's basically kidnapped and arrested again by the other Carmelites. They say that they have no approval to teach in a different way. They were taking a very strict vegan regime, like this Christian post, Christian fasting. They were doing very, very intense practices, and it was humiliating for their brothers that somebody is actually doing spirituality, and it made them look not so spiritual. And everybody wanted to go to confess with these guys. Everybody wanted these guys, like the Franciscans and so forth, when Francis was alive. Everybody wanted now these guys because they were the most spiritual. And the more, let's say, orthodox, more social part of the Carmelites was very, very angry. He was kept in a horrible prison. He couldn't even lie down. He was very short. St. John, Teresa of Avila used to call him a half-priest. Jokefully, she said, we have 1.5 people in the monastery, when there were 2, because John was so small. But even he was very small, he couldn't stretch himself. He was basically locked in a closet for 9 months. Once a week, they would take him out and they say, deny Teresa of Avila, deny the reform, return to the Carmelites. And he would say, no. And then in front of the whole monastery, they would beat him up. They would torture him. He would not be allowed to change his clothes. He suffered terribly. He was broken to pieces, physically and mentally. Very, very difficult period, but he stayed very loyal to his cause, a real spiritual lion. In that time, he starts to write poetry to maintain his sanity. His first poems he writes inwardly and he memorizes them. And then, on one dark night, after 9 months, at 3 a.m., some divine providence, something extraordinary happens, and he escapes the prison. He does the same, this old thing of taking some sheets and tying them together and going out the window. Yeah, that's what he did, like in the cartoons. That's how he escaped, and he sees it as divine providence. Through the grace of Jesus Christ, he was saved. He manages, his body is broken, but he manages to run away, find some nuns of the Descalz Carmelite. They take care of him. 8 months it takes him to heal. And then when he's out of there, he just becomes extraordinarily strong spiritually. Now, Teresa of Avila is the saint of the day. She's the greatest saint in that period in Spain. And she's like, by then, 60-something. And she asks John, who is just in his 30s, to be her confessor, to be her spiritual guide. So it's a very unique state, quite rare in history, where the master, Teresa, raises the disciple, and the disciple grows so quickly. And it's not that Teresa didn't grow in that time, but John grew like a spiritual meteor, that she says, no, now you are my master. Now you are my confessor. And she called him the father of her soul. Even he was 30 years younger than her. He becomes vicar. The Carmelites separate. They have their approval. They open numerous monasteries. He founds universities. He takes different roles. He's the vicar of the Andalusia. He does all sorts of extraordinary things. He's very, very active in spreading the message, this new message of Reformed Christianity, it's a cycle. You see, there is a saintly being, and that saintly being says, enough of the old official religion, let's really live. And then for 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, they really live the spiritual life. And then they become so respected, so loved. There's such a huge, rich institute built around it. And then there's politicians, and then all that happens. And then they lose their spirit. They start to live a more spoiled spiritual life, more on the social, less on the spiritual, until another saintly being comes and breaks it again. Yeah, so it's a kind of like mixing milk, so it doesn't become yogurt or something. You gotta continue to do it. Saints need to come continuously to refresh the religious institute.
Hey guys, thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos on Tantra, spirituality and more.
He passes away quite young, 1591, when he's 49. He's canonized in 1726 as a saint, and in 1926 he's canonized a doctor of the church. Totally, if I remember correctly, we have 36 doctors of the church, and they are doctors of philosophy, of theology, St. Augustine, Thomas of Aquinox, and so forth. But there's only like 5 or 6 doctors of the church which are specific for the mystical life. St. John, St. Teresa, the mother and father of the Reformed Carmelites, and their spiritual daughter 300 years later, which is little Therese, Teresa of Lisieux. All of them describe the innermost part of the spiritual experience. So if you want to understand the inside of the Christian experience, these are the sources. 3 of them are Carmelites, and then we have Catherine of Siena to give another dimension of this innermost spiritual life. The teachings of John, of Saint John. So the most famous term is this dark night of the soul. Now, John didn't want to become a writer. He's a mystic. But so many of he was the confessor of so many people, so many nuns and so many monks, and he saw, well, you're all doing the same mistakes. You're all being misled in the same way. You all have the misconcepts about your inner experience. So I write a book and you read the book, okay? So that all of you understand. Because the questions would kind of repeat and the mistakes would kind of repeat. And his books, The Ascent of Mount Carmel and The Dark Night of the Soul, they're basically a sequence describing his poem, The Dark Night of the Soul. They describe the spiritual journey, not A to Z, but like D to Z. And Z is not so well described. But D to Y is very well described. Not for very, very beginners, but pretty beginners. He says, this is teachings how to quickly attain union with God. Not straight to the point, straight to the target. And he says that many confessors, when the nuns and monks would attain a certain spiritual level, they would guide them the wrong way. Because there are particular nights, there are particular moments on the spiritual path where the grace is concealed deliberately. And it's not because you are a sinner, it's because you are advancing. And it's very, very nuanced. I will explain it in bullet points. You gotta read the books, and I would suggest listen to a few good YouTubes before you read the books, because the books are not so easy to read. But I will try to give you a little bit of a structure, so when you read, those who are interested, you will get a little bit of a structure of what is he talking about. So John describes, and this is general in Christianity, there are three ways, three different stages on the spiritual path. The purgative way, the way in which we purge ourselves from sin, from egoism, from hatred, from pride, from all the vices. And once that is done and we are purified, begins the illuminative way, where we assimilate godly qualities, we start to have light and understanding in faith. And once that culminates and has its full blossoming, we enter the unitive way in which the union with God appears. Now, inside the purgative way, there is the first night. And John describes 4 different nights. He chooses the word night because there is a kind of darkening of the lower faculties and a light that appears beyond it. The first night is the active night of the senses, and this is what John calls, it's like a twilight. At this stage, we start to renounce the world. We go beyond what is temporal, bodily, what is our desires. John described, we have the body, we have the lower soul, which is our desires, our senses and so forth, and the higher soul, which is reason, will, and the spirit. And basically in this stage, in the active night, we are praying to be free from attachments. We are praying to renounce our pride, our selfishness. To quote Ramakrishna, give me detachment from this world and love for thee. This is the beginning of the spiritual path. You go, you become a nun, a monk, you go to an ashram, you let go of your let's say, putting in the first place money and name and fame and I don't know what, social security, whatever it is that makes you tick. And in the active night, the seeker is active and praying, and there is devotion, there is longing, and the entire purgatory way lives on longing. And then what happens after as you accumulate that energy, appears the passive night. And this is very mysterious what happens there. God answers. And there appears inside the practitioner a detachment. And very often they can't pray anymore like before. They can't pray anymore with words. They pray in silence. And some of them would freak out. They would come to their confessor and say, "Oh, I can't pray anymore." And the confessor says, "Oh, you must be a sinner. Go and check if you've done these 7 sins. Read about sins." And John says, no, it's very good. You have reached the first bus station. It's great. You can't pray like this, but you got to pray in silence now. You got to pray in meditation. Now meditation. And you let God. You pray, and then God is answering, and if you continue to pray, you pray over it, you don't get the answer. You need to be quiet now. Yeah, this thing happens not just like a period of a few months, the active night, and then a period of a few months, this passive night. It may also happen like that, but it can also happen in one cycle, in one day of prayer. So there is the particular response, and we start to detach, truly detach. And that process of transformation is sometimes painful and sometimes scary. God will purify what is not clean inside of us. And if we pass this passive night correctly and we become silent and we receive the grace and we transform, there will slowly appear in us another kind of active night. This is midnight. If in the first night we lose the senses, we lose the desires, we don't care anymore. Try to imagine, you pray so much, you are just not that interested, nor in people's praise, nor in money, nor in the outcome of worldly things, nor in sensual pleasure, nor in avoiding pain. All of that loses its intensity in front of that intense contemplative longing, in front of this vast silence of spiritual aspiration. And then this is just the beginning of the path. Okay, this is beginners for John. It's already for most of us extremely high.
Hey guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on spirituality, Tantra and more.
And if you want to sign up for our online classes or for our retreats, you can see our website on the description below.